Okay, I wanted to do a video. This video is going to be about this situation with this guy who was in New Jersey, who was racist against his black African neighbors. He's a white man, and people kept focusing on the racist rant against the black African neighbors. I think they were African. I don't think they were black American. Um, or maybe they were, I'm not sure. It's not really the point of this video to figure out, but basically, this situation was where this guy basically came to this guy's house, black people's house, and harassed them, threatened them, got in their face, tried to kind of push them, spat on them. Those are offenses, That is what made him dangerous to his community. That's what made him breaking, basically, someone who breaks the law, a criminal. He committed many offenses, but his opinion on black people, and calling black people a monkey or the N-word is not a crime, nor has anything to do with the situation, in my opinion. If he was a black man and he did all those things, he should go to jail just the same. So color never had to do with this, and racism never had to do with this. I think this emphasizes the idea of getting rid of people's freedom of speech because he had every right to call them whatever name he wanted, but not in the setting that he was in because he was harassing them, threatening them, and spitting on them and getting in their faces on their property. So that was more the offense. Just calling someone the N word and calling them a monkey is just a part of his right as far as freedom of speech. And he said in a later interview that he had no right to say any of that. It was like anything that he said that wasn't a threat, wasn't spitting on someone, like I said, or harassing people, was not something that he didn't have a right to do. He had every right to call them those names if he wanted to. He didn't have a right to harass, threaten, and spit on people. Those are that's what made him a danger. And, I obviously agree with him being arrested, but it's just like people like to conflate his behavior with his opinions on black people as if it's an illegal offense to call a black person the N word, or it's an illegal offense to call someone a monkey. I think everybody should have the right to be able to call anybody a monkey if they so choose to. If that's a black person, a white person, a Hispanic person, or an Asian person. I feel like a lot of the time people don't understand really these kinds of situations. Almost act like, if you chastise people enough, racist people, homophobic people, etc., that eventually they'll just disappear. They won't disappear. People are naturally who they are going to be, and if people develop their opinions of things and beliefs of things, regardless of how you want them to think. So you wanting to harass this guy for his beliefs, or basically, intimidate him for an apology on what he thinks of black people. Now, I mean, like, of course he should apologize for threatening and all that stuff, but apologize for his racist beliefs. That's his right to have if he so chooses to have. And do you really think making him and forcing him to apologize for being racist going to actually change how he feels inside? No, you're just repressing him more. It's not changing anything. You're just repressing it more. And I mean, I guess you could say, oh, if you repress it, then maybe he'll eventually get along with the program of what you want. No, he most likely what happens in situations like that when you repress it, it just becomes more hidden. And I'll explain a little bit further. For example, when we talk about racist people, I think I have a different opinion on this because I was raised by a woman who is basically homophobic, completely homophobic, extremely homophobic in such deep ways I probably can't even say on here. Um, but she's just naturally that way. I've seen plenty of people like this who, the first time they hear about homosexuality, they get they have a very negative reaction towards it without anyone telling them to. That's just how they are. The thing is, you can keep on trying to beat someone into accepting, but they're still not going to accept. They're just going to smile in your face and fuck you over. That's just what's going to happen, you know? And, like, I guess people like to be like, have a situation where they don't see racism or they don't see homophobia, and so they think that everyone accepts them. And I think the reason people like to have that is because the problem is a lot of the time with homophobia, for example, a lot of people, like I said, are naturally homophobic. They just are. And so it's kind of like, the people who are who are homosexual, basically, they will basically try to use the opinions of people who are homophobic on themselves. This is why they end up turning on themselves because they have internalized those opinions that homophobes have onto themselves. See, basically, a homophobe who's straight is not affected by its opinion of homosexuals. They're not. When I was a kid, I grew up with a homophobe all my life. Homosexuality never came up. She always acted like they didn't exist. Most of the time, homophobes who are really homophobes don't want to be around homosexuals. They avoid them and they don't want to be involved or anything like that. They're not affected personally. The problem is that homosexuals push themselves onto homophobes because homosexuals deep down feel the same way about homosexuality, and that's why they push themselves onto other people in hopes that they can convince themselves that they are acceptable. The problem is this: something went wrong, in my opinion, with the homosexual because the homosexual should be comfortable with itself as it is because you're the homosexual. The homophobe doesn't have to accept anybody. And I feel like, you know, you can't force anyone to accept anybody. This is a free country. What do you mean people have to accept or um, not think negative things of homosexuals or black people or white people? You can't change how people feel about a person. You can't change who shouldn't change. what people say about other people because it's freedom of speech. If you have, if it's freedom of speech that we have, then we have every right to tell a black person, a white person, a gay person, a homophobe, that we don't like them. The same thing here to me is that him sharing his opinion on black people is totally fine to me. The problem is his criminal offenses and his aggressive behavior and basically threatening people and, spitting on people, basically assault. Those are the problems, not what he said about being black. Also, I wanted to come across the second part of this is I get tired of people getting so emotional. I've seen two black conservative channels get all twisted and angry because somebody called somebody the N word or a monkey and acting like, they should be harassed and stuff. And it's like, no one should be harassed for their beliefs and what they have said about another person. They have every right to have freedom of speech. And they have every right to believe what they want to believe. No one's going to change that. The problem is, like I said, with homophobia, racism is quite the same, in my opinion. You see, for example, when I was a kid, I always had an issue with people with certain skin conditions, like people with vitiligo and other conditions where their dots all over the place. I have one of those things where I don't like to see dots. Too many dots freaks the heck out of me. This is why I don't like freckles either. But um, basically, I will always have that negative reaction towards anyone with vitiligo to the point where it's really bad. Honestly, I've had situations where I was on the phone at work, trying to do a survey, and then in the middle of it, I'm just cursing, 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 cursing because I saw someone with vitiligo. So, I mean, I have a very visceral reaction when I see someone with vitiligo, and I always have since I was a little girl. I don't like seeing those type of people. You see how I can have an issue with someone because of the way their skin is colored? You can understand that someone may have an issue with someone who's white or someone who's black off of their skin tone, off of their race. Just the same as I do for people who have vitiligo. It's a natural reaction. It's not like somebody told me to hate people who have vitiligo. It's not. It's just specifically that I have a very bad visceral reaction when things don't look the way they should, basically. What I'm used to, what is normal, from my perspective of what's normal, basically. People who are racist may have the same experience. Maybe they didn't get enough an exposure from one type of people. So now they have a visceral reaction. And that doesn't mean even that they're a bad person, in my opinion. It just means that this is how their upbringing was, and it may not even come from a place of hate. And even if it did come from a place of hate, is it really is it really, to me, it's like, is it really illegal for that person to have that perspective of people of another race? No, it's not illegal. How can it be illegal to have a certain opinion of people of another race? This is a personal belief. The problem is with racism, just like homophobes and, people who, may not like a certain skin condition for that matter, you know, people who are of another race may be negatively affected by the fact that someone is racist. Personally, what I mean is that just like a homosexual, the person who is white or black internalized and they felt negatively about themselves because of that racist person. Now, whose problem is that? It is not the racist person's problem. The person that's the problem to is the person who is of another race who cannot find a way to have actual pride in themselves, despite what other people of other races think of them. Honestly, I think that person is a weak person, honestly. So, to me, I don't think, I think that generally from some of the videos I've watched, and the way people would say that it was basically fighting words for someone to call you a monkey or the N word, to me implies you're willing to fight and risk your freedom because somebody called you a monkey? Is it just that you feel like that's a threat or something that could possibly be true? Because, I mean, who fights someone over something they don't personally believe or feel is a threat to them? Nobody. You only fight someone if you're offended because you actually really believe it to some extent. And so that's why I feel like generally we try to protect the weak, and that's why we try to always censor people who are homophobic and censor people who are racist, you know, to basically make those who would possibly agree with them and hate themselves feel a little better. But the problem is that stuff that they feel like can be basically to a point where they could actually be affected by it is always there. It's always deep down in there, and that's why it gets aggravated anytime somebody calls them a monkey, anybody calls them the N word, or anytime someone calls a gay person the F word or uh, Tinkerbell. I don't know if we can say the other word. Um, I'm thinking we can. Fair. Um, anyway, but you know, it's underneath, basically. And with the problem here is that, well, if it's underneath and it's a problem that you feel insecure about, why don't you let it be up to the forefront, so then you can actually fix it instead of just hauling it around as something you're insecure about and just hiding it away because you do feel inferior to some extent. So that's why, to me, I'm like, I don't know. To me, it's just like when people get like to the point where they think that it's okay to fight someone because they called them the N word or a monkey. It's like it says more about you if you have deduced yourself to fighting someone because they called you a monkey. Because you must believe it to some extent. That's not good. Um, I guess for me personally, I've actually talked to some black people about that. Some of the responses I get was like, "Oh my god, they're uncomfortable." I'm not even gonna get into that, but for me, from my perspective, I've never really been offended by any name anyone's gonna call me for being black or anything because to me, I have too much pride in being black to actually be affected by anyone calling me anything negatively because to me, you're just talking about what's good about me. So, how can I want to be anything less than that? Because that's my perspective. But then again, like I said, I come from a black supremacist family. My grandparents were supremacists. Like, they were actually a part of a group that was literally for black supremacists. My mother was not, but she had some of the uh, beliefs, I guess we could say. It's a hit and miss situation with my mother, honestly. But anyway, I guess that's why for me, it's kind of like I've never really understood why people get so affected by racist people any more than people get affected by homophobic people. Like I said, with racist people, they aren't affected by their own prejudice from people who are black, or white, because they're the other race. So they like what they are. So I don't really get really what I don't really get what is the problem really. Because it's like it's their personal beliefs, it's their freedom of speech. I don't think anyone should be harassed for that. End of story. And, even if someone is a real racist, they still gotta live their lives like the rest of us. So I don't see why we should be harassing them. Harassing them to me validates that what they have to say has some kind of truth to it or some kind of threat to us as our existence. Unless these racist people are making it where we can't go to college, we can't use the bathroom, or we can't get a job, or we can't live where we want to, things of that nature. If, like in his case, he was threatening people, harassing people, spitting on people, of course, those actions need to be reprimanded. But, but basically saying because he is racist or has beliefs that are racist, has, said racist things, those are not anything that's an issue that needs to really be addressed in my last thing I want to say is I kind of think in closing to this that when we basically try to repress homophobes and homophobes and racist people, they're left to their own devices basically to basically hide their beliefs but enact their racist views through action. Then we don't even see it coming. So, I mean, that's another reason why I don't really appreciate just basically trying to basically remove the freedom of speech rights for people of this nature, because if you're not allowed to express your own opinion, you can never have a dialogue. And if you can never have a dialogue, then you can never change minds. With that said, that person would have to have a mindset open for dialogue and open for change, which many are not. And if they're not open to it, you kind of just have to respect that. So that's just all I have to say on that. I mean, like, I agree that he had to be arrested. That was right. Honestly, if it was my situation, I would have not, even if he was a girl or I was a guy, I would not be at the front porch arguing with this man. He was obviously under the influence. I would have just called the police and, I would have locked my door and basically said my neighbor was harassing me, and he is intoxicated. But I mean, like, I don't understand. Obviously, that dialogue wasn't healthy for anything related to their neighborly relations. Like, it had nothing to do with. I mean, it probably did have to do with them being neighbors, but it wasn't productive for any conversation. So why even engage? Unless you really, the only reason someone would engage with that is if they were hurt or they feel offended by it. But you only get offended by things that you somewhat think are true. So that's all I have to say.